Hi, it's Candace. Today I'm going to be talking about assessing Kirkpatrick's Level 2 learning. In the Kirkpatrick model, learning is considered to be the knowledge and skills that increase as a direct result of your training, and Level 2 really focuses on the learning that happens right away. So you do your assessment at the very end of the library session or within a few days. And that's one of the distinguishing features of it from Level 3. With Level 3, some time has elapsed. And so with Level 3, you can look at retention of ideas or behavior specifically about how they apply it for professor's assignments down the road. But when we're talking about Level 2, we're talking about getting a quick, right away idea of whether they got what we taught. So what are we looking for when we're assessing Level 2? You need to have solid student learning outcomes. So you have to have a really good idea of what it is that you want to get the students to get from the session, and then what is it that you're going to assess. Now, we normally have 3 or 4 different student learning outcomes per library workshop, but usually we focus our assessment on 1 or 2 of them. So don't panic of thinking that you have to assess all of the student learning outcomes per session. You're going to get better results if you focus on 1 or 2. You also need to, from your learning outcomes, focus on those that are measurable and capturable. So which ones are going to give you results that you can actually pick up and take back to your office with you after you are done teaching. Here are some student learning outcomes that we have used at Radford University with Level 2. First one, students will be able to generate at least 5 keywords that are relevant to their research questions. Next one is somewhat similar. Students will be able to deal with complex research by breaking complex questions into simple ones. And then the third one, given a sample website, students will be able to articulate why the source is authoritative. So what makes these so accessible at Level 2? These were all outcomes that we were able to do with worksheets. Like I said, we use worksheets a lot at Radford University, and we prioritize hands-on active learning and application of the skills that we're going on. So we have ample opportunity during the workshop for students to practice what we're teaching. And so all these outcomes are ones where we can give a sample research question or a sample complex research question, or give a sample website and have students then record the answers, and then we collect those and use them for the analysis. There are other outcomes which would not be perfectly suited for Level 2, and I took these from the ACRL framework just for some examples. Students will be able to develop and maintain an open mind when encountering varied and sometimes conflicting perspectives. I think that's just way too effective of a learning outcome. We're talking about the mind process. We're not going to be able to get that from a worksheet that students do or a quiz that they do during a library session. Students will be able to use various research methods based on needs, circumstance, and type of inquiry. This is one that is just too ambitious. There are too many components that we could collect within a one-shot session. Students will be able to see themselves as contributors to scholarship rather than only consumers of it. This one to me is much more of a behavior change than of a learning, and that's why I think it would be better addressed at a Level 3 kind of assessment than trying to do something at Level 2. Some of the common approaches that you can use to assess Level 2 include, first, quizzes. And I'm defining quiz as formative opportunities throughout a session. So you do one concept. Let's say you first start with picking a research question. So you spend 10 minutes on that, and then right away you ask 1 or 2 questions of the class and get them to answer the questions there. And then you move on to the next concept, and then right away ask 1 or 2 questions. And at each juncture, you can either use a paper quiz, or you might have an online quiz and use Poll Everywhere or Clickers or Kahoot or Top Hat or something. You need to make sure that you are capturing the answers. You're not just having them show by raising their hands, because that kind of information you can't bring back. I guess you could probably stop and count and then record all that, but that seems like it would break up the flow. So think about things that aren't too disruptive to the class. But that's one way where you can see if students are learning the concepts as you are teaching a session. Related to that are pre and post tests. And with the pre and post test, that would be where before the class starts, you get a sense of where the student's knowledge is. And then after the session, right away, you do a post test that asks similar kinds of questions and see if there's a difference. You need to be careful with these. We first started with pre and post test, asking kind of factual questions like what is a periodical, and then have ABC as the answer, and then ask later what is a periodical, ABC. And the research shows, and my personal experience shows, that that doesn't work as well as you might think. When they're very fact-based, they start thinking in the post test, are they trying to trick me somehow? Facts don't really seem to stick as much, and so what happened alarmingly with me is that the post tests were getting much lower scores than the pre-test, and then students were questioning whether they knew anything, and so I moved away from that. And actually there are a number of articles that show factual based quizzes within that short a time probably aren't the best bet. I have had better luck. I did a workshop recently on media literacy, and I asked students to first tell me how they decide whether a website is credible at the beginning, and just had them do an index card, and then at the end of the session I asked them to flip over the index card and then say how would they, what criteria would they use to evaluate a website now, and then I could compare the two. And that worked out really well. And I think because it was more conceptual rather than asking them like vocabulary questions, it wasn't as much pressure on them. So I think it didn't make the students as nervous, and I got some really good results from that assessment. We use worksheets a lot at Radford, as I mentioned before, and if you have an opportunity to do hands-on exercises throughout your workshop, worksheets are perfect. Some of you may have the opportunity to assign homework to the students after they leave, or if you're embedded in an online class, maybe you can do it that way. And so with homework, that would be something that the librarian assigns, not something that the professor would assign, because that would be more behavior. But if you have that kind of collaboration with a faculty member, that might be an option for you. So a few assessment tips when you're doing level 2. You need to create an artifact. There has to be something that you can take away from the session with you. So worksheets, or if you're doing Kahoot or something where you can download the data afterwards, or a Google form where they fill it out, perfect. You want to avoid things like the classic parent share, where turn to your neighbor and talk about 5 keywords that you might use, because you can't capture that and then you don't get anything that you can assess afterwards. It also can be helpful to tell the students that you're going to collect the worksheets or the index cards or whatever it is later, depending on your student body. I have found with our students that it can help, especially with the freshmen, to get them to take it a little more seriously and put a little more effort into it. And it's also good to let them know you're picking it up, because sometimes if you're doing point of need instruction, they may want the worksheets. And so I also let them know that I can return the worksheets to the faculty member afterwards. What I usually do is make a photocopy and then send the originals back to the faculty member through campus mail, or I can scan them and then send the worksheets to the faculty member as a PDF, whichever is easier for them.